don't want it. I know you don't care about power. But I ask you now, if we choose you, will you wear the crown?
Why do you think I came all this way?
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. After doing a video discussing the downfall of Game of Thrones, I decided after it that I wanted to follow up with one that had a little bit more detail, running through the worst character assassinations that are on the hands of Benioff and Weiss. Now, as with any top 10, these picks are subjective and opinions will vary. With the way Dan and Dave handled the narrative in the final seasons, I think a strong case can be made for many of these characters being in the top tier. In the end, it depends how invested we were in them and how negatively it impacted us to see these once well written characters destroyed. So, with that in mind, let's dive in. At number 10 is Brienne. While she wasn't butchered as badly as some, the ridiculous romance, or I guess it's more accurate to call it a hookup, left the previously strong and indomitable Brienne a blubbering mess when Jaime inexplicably left. Maybe Gwendolyn Christie was just crying from the horrible script. But the real reason Brienne makes this list is because she becomes part of Bran's King's Guard. Why is that a problem? Well, if you paid attention to what the characters actually did in previous seasons, unlike the showrunners, you'd know she should be at Winterfell because she swore herself to Sansa.
Lady Sansa, I offer my services once again. I will shield your back and keep your counsel and give my life for yours if need be. I swear it by the old gods and the new.
Forgot about.
Coming in at 9 is Cersei. After blowing up the Sept, which incidentally she should have received a huge amount of retaliation for in season 7, she didn't do a whole lot. She stared off, often from balconies, and drank wine. There's no plotting or strategy. She's just sort of there, like a figurehead. Well, if you call plotting the pathetic offer to Bronn, a man previously loyal to Tyrion and Jaime, to go kill her brothers. But that was idiotic. While Cersei was never as intelligent as Tywin, she would have never done anything this childish. She would have seized the opportunity before her and sent some troops north and embedded people in there with the mission to kill her rivals. There's so much they could have done to sabotage, and some of that could have even contributed to a defeat for Dany and Jon in the first battle against the Night King. But instead of some real tension and well written drama, they gave us contrived visual spectacles, like the execution of Missandei. At 8 is Jon. Like Cersei, Jon sort of wandered around like a ghost, no pun intended. He was a shadow of his former self. He once defied Stannis and put Mance out of his misery, and he stood up for his principles as Lord Commander and led an expedition north to rescue the wildlings. Then he rose to become king in the north. But in the end, he just sort of lets everything happen around him. He's seemingly only on the fringe of everything, until the end, where Tyrion convinces him to kill Dany. And then for saving the realm, he's rewarded with banishment. In what sane world do you banish the one person who supposedly just saved you from a mad queen? What's equally senseless is he just meekly accepts it and wanders away as if he did something wrong. On top of it, his family betrays him, letting him go. Enjoy your life in exile, Jon. So much for the loyalty of the Starks. I guess, though, everyone was worried that Grey Worm would be checking Jon's Instagram account from Essos to see if he returned. Speaking of Jon's lineage, as I mentioned in depth in my Jon Snow video, nothing is done with the huge reveal that Jon is a Targaryen. Inexplicably, he has no real reaction to it. It feels as if Dan and Dave didn't want Jon to have any position of power or real purpose, so they gave his character nothing. With the way they rendered him useless, it would have been just better at least if he had died on the battlefield at Winterfell. Instead, they just had him wander through the final season with the same control over his actions as one of the Night King's minions. Next up at 7 is Arya. R.I.P. Arya. She perished toward the end of season 6. It's nonsensical that she survived a stabbing and a fall into the water to then swim and then be able to run, fight, and defeat the waif after all of it. I'd add that she didn't succumb to the infection from being in the water with open wounds, but I suppose the knife she was gutted with held some sort of magic that transferred her into a superhero, ready to join the Avengers. Sort of like when Peter Parker was bitten by a spider. After killing countless of the dead in Winterfell, though, she suddenly lost her powers in the library at Winterfell, fearful of the Whites that had taken a diversion from the fight to find good books to read. But after that brief glimpse of weakness, Arya's powers are restored to a height we've never seen before. It took a full team of Avengers to defeat Thanos, but Arya the Great has mastered the ability of flight and is able to soar above the White Walkers and kill the Night King all on her own. Coming in at 6 is Bran. Dan and Dave always struggled with the magical and supernatural elements on the show. It's one reason they probably left Bran completely out of season 5, and that's not something you can do if you plan on making him king. What's even worse, though, is that they had him acting so incredibly creepy when we do see him.
And you were so beautiful. In your white wedding dress.
I have to go back inside, Bran.
I'll stay a bit longer.
I don't see how even Sansa would think this guy could be king, let alone would the rest of the realm accept him. It's terrible. You can't relate to the character in any way. His motivations and powers are never fully defined. Benioff and Weiss seemingly lack the capacity to understand that the non-sociopathic part of the Game of Thrones fanbase isn't going to bond with a character who has no emotions, displays no affection for others, and says weird things.
You won't be able to help us in this fight if I let them murder you first.
What about afterwards?
How do you know there is an afterwards?
At 5 is Tyrion, the man who single-handedly devised a successful plan to hold King's Landing during Stannis' attempt to take the throne becomes, in later seasons, a bumbling idiot. He even somehow forgot the true essence of his very own sister. Tyrion actually believes that by bringing a white to her, that she'll suddenly join forces with Dany and Jon. This is in the wake, too, of her just blowing up all her enemies in the Sept. Tyrion's character assassination was so bad that many fans thought that he actually made a deal with Cersei when they met alone, that they'd come up with some sort of agreement off screen. But no, this wasn't the case. In the end, he was really that stupid. But it gets even worse.
You're not a monster. I know this. I know this because I've seen it. I beg you.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
There's a pattern starting here that we'll also see with 2 other previously intelligent characters. Not surprisingly, Dan and Dave just can't construct the appropriate plots for these types of people. And that brings us to 4, Littlefinger. The man who worked behind the scenes to manipulate so many different events and a primary cause for so much of the turmoil the realm experienced in recent years becomes like Tyrion, a buffoon. He actually attempts to turn Sansa against her own sister. What a brilliant idea. It would make much more sense to just focus on the great unknown Dany and the threat she could present, particularly with Jon aligning with her. But even before all of that, I think Peter Baelish would have removed himself from Winterfell after Jon became king. It's no longer a place for him with that power shift. Jon even grabbed him by the throat, and Bran was pulling his creepy stuff.
Chaos in the world. I can only imagine.
Chaos is a ladder.
I'm sorry to have disturbed you, Lord Stark.
I'm not Lord Stark.
No red flags there at all. This is the same person who fled King's Landing after Joffrey's murder. He's not going to hang around after being confronted like this.
Touch my sister, and I'll kill you myself.
I think Littlefinger should have survived to the final season, but someone like Varys needed to contribute to his demise. It's fine if Sansa is part of it. After all, he has an infatuation with her, and it would be appropriate for her to play a role in it. At 3 is the third of 3 mastermind-type characters that Benioff and Weiss butchered, Varys. His very first scene in the final season represents how far his character devolved.
You should consider yourself lucky. At least your balls won't freeze off.
You take great offense at dwarf jokes, but love telling eunuch jokes. Why is that?
Because I have balls, and you don't.
Like many on this list, Varys really doesn't do anything of consequence in the final season. Like Littlefinger, he decides to stay when danger surrounds him. He's been trying to have Dany poisoned, but she stopped taking food, which is a clear warning that she's onto something being wrong, but Varys remains undeterred. 'Tis the season for treason, and Varys is just going to sit at Dragonstone and write out his seditious notes from his desk. Under the nose of Daenerys. What could go wrong? Early season Varys was a survivor, and would have never done any of this nonsense, but the Master of Whispers inexplicably lost his intelligence and the art of subterfuge. Next is Jaime at number 2. Remember this?
If your precious Brandy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, and children burned alive, would you have done it?
Dan and Dave kind of forgot it, though.
For yourself, if not for her, then for every one of the million people in that city, innocent or otherwise.
To be honest, I never really cared much for them, innocent or otherwise. And stand by while thousands of men, women...
Forgot about.
At this point in the show, you just realized that anything was a jump ball. The character arcs would be discarded to fill plot points. So convoluted. Once Jaime cuts the cord with Cersei and leaves for the north, you can't come back to this point. Unless, of course, it's Jaime returning to put an end to her. What makes this even more cringeworthy, though, is that they have Jaime get involved with Brienne, only to then leave. I guess after Bronn told him that Cersei had hired him to kill both of his brothers, that he was drawn back by her unwavering love. It's all inexcusable. Before I go to number 1, I want to address some of my key omissions. I think Euron was the most laughable character on the entire show, even more than Arya, who gained her power from being gutted by that magic knife. But Euron was more of a character assassination from the book version. Since we first saw him, he came across as if he had wandered from the Pirates of the Caribbean set. But yeah, he was terrible. Doran Martell is similar. He's nothing like the book version, and really this mess is all more a part of the ridiculousness of the Sand Snakes and the complete destruction of the Dorne plot. Stannis was done poorly too. It felt like Benioff and Weiss were in a rush to remove him from the story because they had too many characters and didn't know what to do with them. But I don't think he rose to the same levels of these 10. Finally, we're at number 1. And there's no suspense or surprises here. It's Dany, of course, who previously displayed no indications of madness, but suddenly, like Pavlov's dogs, reacted to the sounds of the bells and went crazy. Burning thousands of innocent people, even though it's the people who she had previously delayed her departure from Essos to protect, and for whom she also diverted her efforts to the north to face the Night King. Now she's nuts because it makes it a cool visual for the showrunners. If anyone, it was Cersei who had the arc of becoming the Mad Queen. Now, while most people get it, there's maybe about 2 or 3% out there that just don't. They think Dany burning the Tarleys or the Khals is an evidence of madness. But this is a double standard that isn't applied to the other characters in this world. If Dany is mad for doing those things in wartime or to save others, then Tywin is too for ordering the slaughter at the Red Wedding. Jon executed the men of the Night's Watch, including a boy. Tyrion could have escaped, all on his own, but he decided to go back to his father and killed him in the privy with a crossbow. Arya wiped out the Freys. The bottom line is that Game of Thrones takes place in a very harsh, medieval-style world where violence is prevalent. And there's a big difference between killing your enemies, righting past wrongs, protecting your family, and trying to build a better world than becoming like the Night King and wanting to kill everyone around you. So that's my top 10. Let me know in the comments where you'd rank yours. Before you go, don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, If you're interested in more on Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, listen to Caraxes and subscribe. I want to thank everyone for watching, and I'll see you soon.